Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and welcome back to Goose Junkies. Tonight, for episode 24, we're going to be finishing off what we've been working towards as the John Tron trilogy. And we're going to be looking at Goosebumps' Don't Go to Sleep, and we're going to face it off against Are You Afraid of the Darks? The Tale of the Wisdom Glass. As usual, we're joined by the two incredible panelists alongside me. BD, who goes by the Horror Tavern on his channel, and Micah, the Ultimate Goosebumps Man. How are you guys doing tonight?
Yo, 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 people and patrons of the night. I am off an extremely long shift, which is partly why I got sunglasses on. I look like I smoked 5 pounds of ganja. There's also a terrible thunderstorm going on, so if my windows shatter during this, discussion video, easily we got to get 10 million views on this. I want to monetize my death scene live. But speaking of that, I'm very excited because we're wrapping up the John Tron trilogy. Obviously, it's a legendary trilogy. Don't Go to Sleep has got some wild plots to it, and Wisdom Glass has got equally wild stuff, and it's got the same main character from the both episodes playing in it. So this is going to be hype. I got the shades on because I'm an honorary reality police member. I finished the academy, which is why there's no reality where I'm not spamming Victoria Justice DMs, and there's no reality where Night of Living Dummy 3 is a top 10 book. So let's get on with the review.
That was hilarious. Okay, Mike, I know you have to follow up that, but how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good. Getting to rewatch some of these episodes was fun. Being pleasantly surprised with Don't Go to Sleep. I forgot, I used to think this was one of the worst episodes, but after rewatching it, my tune has changed somewhat.
I feel you. I'm in the same boat. I feel, which is going to be interesting. As usual, we wish Spongy444 was here, but he's here in spirit, and we'll be reading off his thoughts as we go along the comparison. But we might as well get into the discussion now. So, Don't Go to Sleep is a book and a story that was turned into an episode in the 90s show that is pretty much gone under the radar for many years. Not a lot of people know about it until quite a few years ago now, when a YouTuber named JonTron selected 3 episodes from the Goosebumps show to kind of riff on. And Don't Go to Sleep was put into the main spotlight again, or if it ever was before. And it's now become more well known, more so for the episode, which is why we faced off Don't Go to Sleep in this Are You Afraid of the Dark story we picked tonight, because there's a certain element that is similar, which is a courtroom essentially going on in each story. And I'm gonna throw it over to whoever wants to take the book about Don't Go to Sleep. I think it's BD, right? BD, you want to take it? All right. So why don't you tell us about Don't Go to Sleep's book and give us your thoughts on it?
This was a first time read for me, so I got to experience the book and its wild, crazy plot for the first time. So to cover a little bit about the plot, the book starts off with the main character, Matt, and you find out that he's your typical middle school kid. He loves reading comic books, he loves science fiction, but he's got a really dysfunctional family life. He's got an older brother, Greg, who basically is doing this project where he has to record his entire family, like he's examining animals at the zoo. So he on like a tape recorder is saying like, yo, my brother's a geek. We're watching the geek in his natural habitat, reading his comic books like a dork. So he's getting picked on by his older brother. His older sister, Pam, is kind of the same way as Greg. She basically picks on Matt, basically gives him noogies, does a whole bunch of stuff. And they got this I guess like dash hound dog called Biggie, a little small barking dog that basically loves everybody but hates Matt and is always barking and trying to bite him. So he's got a really just sort of tough life going on at the moment. And his mom is a single mom because his father died when he was a baby. So she's working 2 jobs trying to pay the bills. We all know how that goes. Not like I pay him. But she's basically working her butt off trying to make sure that her family's taken care of. So he doesn't really have much choice but to deal with the cards that he's got. And what ends up happening is that one day he ends up basically falling asleep and he ends up waking up to a completely new reality. And he thinks, well, maybe this is part of a dream, but he realizes, no, I'm awake. Because as he goes downstairs, he starts realizing before he heads down there that my feet are bigger. I'm taller. I grew like 6 inches. And he realizes that he grew up. He's actually 16 years old. And his two older siblings, Pam and Greg, are actually 12-year-olds. Now they're the middle schoolers. And the mom is acting like everything's okay. They're acting like, Matt is the weirdo for acting up. You get some minor, you gotta believe me stuff, but it's pretty moderate considering he's in a parallel world, so that's fair. Um, he goes to high school. You get some funny Disney Channel sitcom type of scenes where he ends up like an advanced calculus class and he's struggling. I've been there. Listen, we all been there. Yo, you start realizing, yo, wallahi, I'm finished. I can't read this passage right now. He gets into some tough, literature class stuff. And eventually he ends up sleeping it off. He goes to bed. He wakes up. He's in a new reality where he's got no siblings and he's got completely random strangers who are claiming that they are his parents. So you find out that every time this guy falls asleep, he goes into a completely different parallel world. And it gets crazier and crazier until he starts realizing that there are certain people within these parallel worlds that are appearing in front of him and yet retaining the same personality, which doesn't make much sense. And he realizes, well, there might be some interdimensional authorities who have come and realized, hey man, you're breaking the universal code. You're throwing the world into a whole lot of pandemonium. So we got to come and take care of you. And he has to find out a way to get back to his normal life. At the same time, trying to avoid whatever fate goes towards him. So, Marvel's Loki show, you know where they got the inspiration from. We need Stein to get some royalties that they were ripping off this shit, man. We got to say it for what it is. But overall, my thoughts about the book, I was decently surprised because from what I've heard about a lot of people, a lot of people kind of trash on the book. They say, different things about it. Some people like it, but you'll hear a lot of negative things about it. I thought it was a pretty good book. I actually had a relatively fun time with how crazy the plot was. And one of the big things I like about this book is the fact that the reality hopping, the parallel dimension stuff actually starts to work as a superpower in a strange way for Matt's benefit, where he learns, okay, if I'm in a tough situation, I can go to sleep and I can basically roll the dice and take a gamble, and see, if I can get out of the situation. There's a scene where he's trapped inside of this like cage or trapped inside of this place with a net, and he decides, all right, let me roll the dice, fall asleep right now because I'm exhausted, and he turns into a rodent, he turns into a squirrel, and he manages to get out of there. So he finds some ways, some creative ways to basically use this reality warping power. I like the idea of there being these ridiculous interdimensional authorities who are basically running the parallel universe thing going on. Again, if you watch Loki, Marvel's Loki, you know about this. They do these type of stories, but Stein did it first. Know that Stein did it first. So I thought that was all pretty fun. And I like the moral at the end of the story for what it is. I think you got some good character development stuff involving Matt. But the reason why I give it 7.5 is there are some negatives. Some of the negatives I would say is that certain parts of the book drag and get repetitive. The You Gotta Believe Me stuff is moderate, but it can get a little bit annoying at times. And the storyline with him getting new parents really didn't go anywhere. It didn't really feel needed. It just sort of felt like it was just shoehorned in there just to be like a plot device. You can argue that sometimes his reality warping powers are plot armor, but I sort of let that go. And the morals at the end of the story are good, but if you think about it, his life is still kind of shitty. So it's like, yeah, he accepts his life for the way it is, but he's still being dealt bad cards in a lot of ways. So it sort of feels forced. It doesn't feel like his family learned any lessons. It doesn't feel like they're any more grateful for him. It just feels like he's sort of being forced into a situation where he has to be grateful. And that twist ending, y'all, that twist ending is the least threatening twist ending in all of Goosebumps that I've read. Because I don't want to spoil it, but let's just say that this whole situation could literally be solved at the end of the story with a simple, nah, I'm cool. That's all a character has to say at the twist ending, where it's like, nah, I'm cool. I'll just move something back to where it was and the whole situation is solved. So that felt kind of anticlimactic. But overall, fun, wild story. If you want some absolute bat shit crazy stuff that felt like Stein was on meth while writing in the best way, you should check out Don't Go to Sleep, because I think you're in for one heck of a roller coaster for a Goosebumps book. But let me hear my fellow panelists' thoughts about it.
Yeah, I'll let Micah take this one before I say anything. Micah, what's your thoughts on it?
Okay. So I thought the book was actually pretty fun. It was kind of one of those pleasant surprises because like you don't really hear anybody talking about this book at all. And while I wouldn't say it deserves to be hailed as one of the all-time greats or anything on the level of like Haunted Mask or Dummy 2 or any of those books, it's still one of those kind of hidden gems of the Goosebumps original 62. There's a lot of really fun elements to it. It's definitely leaning more onto the silly side of things than the horror side, but it does the silly elements very well. And it's just kind of it's a very engaging read from beginning to end, just having these constant jumping between different realities and having these realities progressively get more insane as they go along. And there's just a lot of really fun elements, just him trying to escape from the reality police and kind of the mystery of who these guys are and why they are following him throughout most of the book. And there's just a lot of really, I don't know how to describe it. It's just kind of an entertaining book from beginning to end. And I definitely agree that the twist ending is not very good. It's not really a twist at all. It's just kind of there and not scary at all. But I do like the fact that the reality police are named Bruce and Wayne, though, because I'm a big Batman fan. So I thought that was a really fun little nod to Batman. And yeah, I thought I enjoyed the book overall. I gave it a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, both of y'all are pretty much right where I'm at with it. I'm kind of in the middle at a 7.2 out of 10. But I guess I'll share my thoughts here. We've already touched on the plot, so we don't need to go over that. I'm just gonna get the negatives out the way first because I think those are easier to kind of stress here in the shortest way possible without going into too much depth. The first half I feel of the book not only meanders but it's unfocused. Right, you have this setup within the first two chapters. The events randomly start, and it's more taking its time in the first half, and you're like, where is this going? Is as Matt discovers he is entering new realities, he doesn't quite take advantage of exploring these realities or kind of, looking at the brighter side of things. He's just more focused on, hey, I'm not myself, and he's more manic about it. When you get to the back half, though, it becomes more focused, becomes more, oh, the reality police come into the focus. He's running from them. He's now in self preservation mode, trying to get back home, trying to avoid getting in trouble with who knows what is going to do to him because they're interdimensional beings. And he actually comes to a solution on his own, and he is a problem solver. So, Matt, over time, he becomes a better character, but it takes a while for the book to kind of click on and get more zany and wild. I don't think it really realized the potential of it. If it's going, I feel like Stein couldn't make his mind up whether he wanted Matt to kind of entertain these new realities. We saw the alternate family reality where he has a dad and a father, right? Is he going to explore that? Is he going to look at as that as a better life opportunity, or is it just going to be crazy manic fun like we got in the second half, where it is, you got lion cages at carnivals, you got the kid turning into a squirrel. There, it might be dated, but you had him turn into an obese kid where he has to, traverse the siding of a house. It's dumb fun stuff like that you see in the second half. And I just feel like the book is kind of lost. It's lost within itself a little bit, narratively speaking. Constructively, it's fine. It's a fun book because you go on this wild reality warping adventure. That's not the problem. It's trying to tie together the themes and what exactly is Stein trying to do with Matt as a character. I don't really feel that the book does a great job at characterizing him into an actual arc. The back portion with the moral, when you get that near the end, I think feels a little bit tacked on and forced. Like BD said, you don't really feel like Matt has gone through a journey enough to appreciate his crappy life, and why he's thankful for his family feels almost like he's just thankful he's back in his actual self and not somebody else. And I feel like the book needed to kind of explore him becoming somebody else, because for him to appreciate that, you have to feel like he hits a real low and a real high to kind of come to that balance in the middle. I just don't buy that. Um, I think the book would have worked better as a thematic story if Stein put a little more effort into it, just a little more. I know this is original 62. In the 50s, Stein had Give Yourself Goosebumps. He had Tales to Give You Goosebumps still kicking around. He was trying to figure out what he's going to do for triple header. All of this was coalescing around this time. The guy was busy. Okay, he kind of. I see the appeal of the idea. He he had a creative spot at least. Maybe he was reminiscing on some Twilight Zone, and he was like, I want to give something Rod Sterling like for Goosebumps, and for that, it's a fun change of pace. It's a fun read when it is fun, but it could have been so much better. Like there's so much untapped and unused potential, and even wasted potential in the book to make it one of those great books. And I think a lot of it has to deal with Matt as a character and his journey, trying to focus it a little bit better. Stein kept entertaining the will he, won't the. Are we trying to tell an emotional story about him looking for a new family, or are we trying to have a frightening story of him losing himself and or trying to keep himself intact? He does. The book doesn't know what it's trying to be sometimes, but nonetheless, I think it's pretty fun in that average good way. It could be a little bit better written, could be better in some areas, but it's fine. That's just how I think about it. So that's where I'm at with it. Anybody else want to add on to that before we get to Spongy?
I was gonna say, I think one of the reasons why I guess I find it pretty fun overall, kind of same with you, where it's like it's a middle of the road book for me, but it's a little bit on a better end of the middle end for me. And that's because it kind of feels like there's two OG62 books that I've read so far that feel like Give Yourself Goosebumps books done as like main storyline stuff, and that's how I got my Shrunken Head. And this book, Don't Go to Sleep, while I was reading it, felt like a Give Yourself Goosebumps book where these alternate realities could be extra storylines in a GYG. Some of the stuff that you come to in terms of like turning into a monster, using your powers to turn into like different animals and stuff, that stuff is usually within a GYG. So if you like that sort of crazy, zany structure, I think you would enjoy this one. Much like when you read How I Got My Shrunken Head, there's so many different things in the jungle that you got to deal with in terms of threats that it feels like you're going through a video game level. So I think that's part of the appeal. That if you like that style, you might be more favorable towards this book. But if you like more cohesive storylines, this might not be the one specifically for you.
Yeah, that's a good point. It is one of those throw some random crap in their books, quite literally, but I think it's one of the better ones. It doesn't go too off the rails and too random, and in the concept itself doesn't overstay any boundaries, because shifting realities is a quite open concept. There's nothing limited to that, so it allows more creativity there. As we'll see when we get to the episode, it perhaps narrows it down to a theme, but here it made it for an unpredictable ride, and the ride was mostly fun when he did click on to that. But as you mentioned, like the stuff with the high school is kind of like deprecation humor, which kind of works. But then you have the random family that just kind of feels thrown in there. Like he gets a new family. Like why is this in here? It's just like I said earlier, it needs to pick a lane and stick with it. If you're going to be crazy and off the wall, just lean into it and make some wild adventure story and focus it a little bit better. But as is, I think we all are on the same page here. It's kind of a hidden gem, kind of overlooked, underrated
Mhm.
maybe. Um,
Yeah.
but let's get into Spongy's thoughts. I want to see if he's on the similar wavelength here.
All right. Let's see what he's got to say. Okay, so here's Spongy's thoughts about the Don't Go to Sleep book. This was one of the first ones I read, and it holds up fine. It has more of a Twilight Zone vibe to it, having Matt getting into a vaguely explained situation to learn a lesson. The reality idea is fun, and there are fun moments with the different realities we get. There's some good humor, like in the scene where he's a monster. I do like the idea of the reality police, but I think it tries a bit too hard to explain things while still not explaining things enough. It can feel rushed as they don't always spend enough time in these realities, and it could have gone more all out. The setup is oddly depressing, and the moral is kind of weakly done as it basically says he should have accepted things like the abuse from the siblings. I think Why I'm Afraid of Bees did the moral better. It's still a fun enough book, a bit underrated, even if it could be better. Abuse is a strong word, but yeah, his siblings are kind of shitty.
Yeah, I have to agree. I have to agree. Like what he said, pretty much is how I feel. So, all right. So we're all kind of on the same page with the book for once. For once, we haven't had this kind of agreement in a while. So this is going to be interesting. Let's move on to the episode. I'm going to pass over to Micah. Micah, why don't you talk about the "Don't Go to Sleep" episode, what it's about, and what's your thoughts?
So, Don't Go to Sleep's episode is pretty drastically different from the book. It's another one of those kind of more in name only adaptations where it takes the core idea of the book but then goes in a wildly different direction with it. And basically, the episode once again involves Matt with his two older siblings and his mom. And instead of wanting to go into the guest room like in the book, Matt wants to move his room up into the attic. And of course, like in the book, his mom says no. And this Matt decides to go up there and go to sleep there anyway. And he kind of has this like dialogue with this mannequin he sees across from his bed. And he's just kind of talking about how like who needs reality? I hate reality. And when he falls asleep, he ends up waking up and he's kind of the star of his house. Everyone's still the same age, but he realized that he is a pro hockey player and he has to go to this game. He has no idea what he's doing. He's never played hockey before, and he is awful when he's actually at the game. And there's some really funny stuff in there with the hockey coach. Some of his dialogue is really entertaining and great. And that's a really fun scene. And when he's or I should say, is before he leaves for this hockey game, you see this black car pull up, and these two guys who look basically like Men in Black appear out the window and stare at Matt. And these are the reality police. So you could establish the reality police pretty early on in the episode, which is a nice touch versus the book where they come in much later in the book. And basically, when at the hockey game, he ends up running into one of the reality police who basically kind of taunts him until he escapes through the hockey goal and wakes up, I believe is in a surgeon's office. And basically, he has to perform this life-saving brain surgery on the president. And there's like this really, again, another really wild scene of like him like going kind of hallucinating almost and like seeing things really weird as he's kind of panicking as he's literally holding this like saw to cut through this president's head. And eventually he ends up escaping that reality and enters into a bomb diffusion situation. And once again, much like the other situations, he freaks out. He has no idea what he's doing. And the guy who's like I don't know what kind of role he plays, but the other guy who's kind of with Matt in the situation, he has some really funny stuff in it. And he's, again, kind of taunting Matt. And Matt, of course, goes into another reality where he is now about to get married. And I don't know how to say this without being offensive with the bride. No offense to the actress, but the bride is kind of meant to be a little bit more of kind of your stereotypical ugly person. And no offense, but this is how the episode plays it out to be. And basically, again, he encounters the reality police and all these different realities. And eventually, after this wedding sequence, he gets put on trial in front of this reality judge who is very hammy acted, very entertaining to watch. He's just really goofy, very funny. This whole court scene is very over the top, and it's probably one of the most entertaining scenes in the whole episode. And Matt's trying to like probably plead not guilty and get out of this situation before something that probably bad happens to him. And there's some really weird stuff going on. And there's some weird, like a special effect where he's sitting in a chair and like there's like this void under him. It's very bizarre and goofy. But eventually he ends up waking up back in his own reality and he learns to kind of appreciate everything that's going on. He appreciates his life. He's kind of happy to be back. and there's a twist involving him going back up into the attic to retrieve something, and something happens involving the reality police, and it's implied that there's a dark ending for Matt, which is a much better twist than in the book. Now, my thoughts on the episode. I was pleasantly surprised rewatching this episode after a long time of thinking it was really bad. Like I never remember not liking it when I first saw it, but I found a newfound appreciation for this one. It's very zany, very fun. Again, it's not the most scary episode or anything like that, but it's just another one of those episodes that's just very enjoyable. Of the reality police are great in this episode. The two guys who play them are great. They're really having a fun time with the roles. You can just kind of tell they're much more present threats than in the book, which I really like. The realities are played a little differently in the episode, while in the book it's kind of just more kind of random realities that Matt stumbles into. The episode kind of plays into this idea of maturing before your time and kind of being forced into doing adult things when you're still a kid and not experienced enough to deal with this kind of stuff, which I think is a much better approach, honestly. I think it plays into those childhood fears more of growing up too fast and not being able to really enjoy your childhood. And that's just a really prevalent thing, especially for someone like me and for all of us as we're adults now, and realizing that it's not all that it's cracked up to be when we're kids. And you kind of we always have our moments where we kind of long to go back to our childhoods when it was a simpler time. And that kind of plays into that in this episode. I think Matt, while the acting is not great in this episode, other than the reality police, they're serviceable. I think Matt is still fun in his performance. It's bad, but it's enjoyably bad. And I just really like it overall. There's, again, another difference is that in these realities, he doesn't have to go to sleep to transfer between realities. He just kind of jumps between them at will. But that was just a random point, but my opinion, this is a really fun episode. Again, an episode that I feel like if you had apprehensions or thought it was a really bad episode, maybe with the stipulations of the John Trump video in mind, try this episode again and just see what you think about it, because I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with how it ended up being. And I give it a 7.5 out of 10. Like, I enjoyed it a lot.
Great points, Mike. I guess I'll share my thoughts and kind of add on to yours here. Yeah, I was kind of in the camp before I rewatched this. I was like, this is like so bad it's good episode. I was like always in like the defensive part when people called it bad, because I was just programmed to think that it's actually bad. But then I rewatched it because I haven't seen it in a long time, and I've been doing kids horror for years now. I watched it and I said, you know what? They essentially turned Don't Go to Sleep's book and made it into how a short story version of it would play out. They condensed what didn't work in the first half out of the equation. And then they focused on the second part of the book where it's more fun, and they just turned up they turned up the ridiculousness a little bit, but they also focused it at the same time. And I'm like, you know what? Functionally, they picked a lane here. This While the story is very lacking, and I think that's one huge knock against the episode. The story is just not there. But the events, like you brought up, are focused into Matt's, insecurity about growing up too fast, and that's a common theme that Goosebumps' television show tried to drill home with episodes, and I think it fits right at home with that. And in my opinion, after watching it this time, I think it's actually serviceable. I think it's mostly fine. Like I said, you brought up the acting. I think the acting's actually not that bad. I think in terms of performances, they're all enjoyable. Even the ones that are weaker, like Matt, he's still fun in this. I mean, you can tell that they looked at the concept of the book and they said, you know what, we're just going to make a fun little episode for the kids. And you can tell that everybody involved in this episode wanted to make something paying homage to the book, which was more humorous, especially when we get to those later portions. I totally see how that humor translated with the writers and the producers of this show who wanted to put their own stamp on it, because obviously budget. You can't pull off half the stuff they did in the book. Turning a kid into a giant lizard monster, yeah, probably not going to fly. Turning a kid to a squirrel, we saw what happened in Barking Ghost. We don't need that. Okay, let's just focus and keep Matt as a kid, but essentially in spirit as an adult going through this stuff. I thought it was really clever. Um, you brought up some of the scenes; they're absolutely fun. The ice hockey scene with Don Cherry, the famous hockey coach, was hilarious. The the scene with the doctor in the doctor's room and in the bomb diffusion area was hilarious too. And then you have, of course, have the wedding scene, which is so bizarre, but it kind of drills home the what they're kind of going for here, because of the whole thing with Matt's sister early on, and he makes a comment saying, "Well, I wish I was older so I can get a private line," and you know, you reap what you wish for. You know what I mean? But yeah, negatives. There's the story is not as rich as the book can be. I think the book had more of an adventure focus than the episode. I think the episode felt a little more random than the book even. It was more throw some random crap in there. But they were doing that for pace, I guess. The book kind of had a better atmosphere as well, but the episode where it suffered the most was kind of losing the story and the emotion behind it. I guess started off, it's just kind of Matt's just an average kid. He goes to bed in his room, and then you don't really get much out of his character, minus what he's going through, and the story's not that riveting. When you think back on the episode, you're remembering the events, not what happens necessarily to Matt. You know what I mean? Matt's of course getting affected by these events, but it's not anything too heavy to weigh on. Um, but I think the Men in Black, who look like Agent J and K from Men in Black, almost spot on. Another one of those things that I think that these TV shows back in the '90s, we saw in Are You Afraid of the Dark, in the Tale of the Secret Admirer, where the chick there was obviously supposed to be Jennifer Love Hewitt. They spot on try to pull off Agent J and K in this, and they're actually incredible. Any scene they were in, you can tell they're having fun. The guy playing the judge, the reality judge, um, he was just over the top and kooky. And the way the episode is shot, I have to commend it. And I can tell that they built some sets here, or even reused ones. I think the attic, it looked like the Dummy 3 attic, or it was the other attic from that one episode, Let's Get Invisible, I think. It looked very familiar. But even then, they tried to build some set pieces. It's very '90s, but it has this charm to it. It's entertaining. You can overlook some of the bad qualities in it and kind of forgive some, but then the others are, you have some really bad placed music. You have that weird, still tacked on ending that I just don't feel like works. But I guess in this scenario, it works a little bit better because Matt just, the only realization he has in the episode is the fact that, hey, I don't need to be older. I can enjoy my youth. You simplify it down, but you also dumb it down a little bit. It could have been a little bit more to it, but I'd probably give it the same score as the book because I think they're both evenly matched in their own qualities. So I'd give it a 7.2 out of 10 or a 3.6 out of 5. BD, I'm going to pass it over to you unless Micah wants to add on to that, to continue on about your thoughts if you want.
Yeah, I would give this episode probably a 7.2 out of 10. So it's an above average episode for me. Some of the positives I have about it is obviously this episode gets me to laugh a lot. There's a lot of points where I'm just laughing and having a good time. The Men in Black absolutely carry the episode. I mean, they are hilarious. The fact that they pull up in the all black whip and they got their own theme song, that's reality. I was like, yo, that's fire. The fact that they got their own theme song, the way that the actors enjoy their roles is really fun. Seeing them in the hockey ring playing different like goalies and members is fun. The fact that you got them laughing maniacally. There's a scene at the wedding where basically Matt is going up to his bride, and I think she like took a bite out of an onion, and then the one of the agents comes up and he's like, "I hope you didn't forget the ring." I was like, "Yo, they're having a good time, and therefore I'm having a good time because you get the sense that they're actually enjoying the role. Um, some of the things I like about it, obviously, we brought up Don Cherry. He's hilarious. Seeing his absolutely funny old school commentary just going at Matt. He's like, look at this guy. This guy's on the floor, man. $10 million on this dude. That's hilarious to see in action. And even Matt, his acting is bad, but it's like a charming sort of bad. Like, if you've ever seen The Room is kind of like that, where, like, yeah, it's bad acting, but it's got charm to it. Like when he's up in the attic and he's like, not old enough. Like, what's gonna happen? And I was like, oh my god, you can't even make this shit up. And the fact that like when he's getting hit by the hockey players, it sounds like Iron Man's repulsor blast. He's like, It's like, dude, what the hell? It was a lot of fun stuff in there. I like the doctor scene. The doctor scene, I think, is actually probably the best reality because it's so intense and it's basically hyping up that yeah, you're the man, but you don't want to be the man as an adult because you got all this pressure on. And they ham it up. They do a fun job. Even the nurse is like, you're a kid, but you're a genius. It's like, okay, bro. And the bomb defusal scene, the fact that they put that in a kids horror episode for Goosebumps is pretty dope. I didn't expect bomb defusals to be in this thing. So that was all good. So those are all positives to it. I do have negatives though that I do think are not it doesn't do as well as what the book does, which is in the book the idea of reality warping actually becomes a power mechanic for Matt. He actually starts weaponizing it and using it to overcome obstacles. He finds out that hey, I can fall asleep, I can roll the dice, I can gamble and see if I can get out of situations. Yeah, that's got plot armor, but you see him actually using his mind. You actually see him averting from the you got to believe me stuff to actually, okay, I'm going to settle down and I'm going to try to get my way out of here and get to home base. So he starts focusing on that, which is nice character development. When he gets back from the realities in the book, you see him start like hugging his family members. He starts saying like, yo, Greg, I love you. Yo, Pam, I love you. I don't care if you guys make fun of me. I'm just happy right now that I'm in your guys' presence. He gives his mom a hug. In the episode, he just sort of returns from the attic and his mom is like, oh, you're sure you don't want the room in the attic? And he's like, I don't want to go up there again. And that's pretty much it. It doesn't go further than that. He doesn't go and start like praising his family and stuff. So that sort of is missing from what the book has. And the book has some good writing to it. Again, it's got that sort of like Disney Channel charm to it in terms of its writing, where he's sort of using his brains and figuring out stuff. You got good humor. The episode is funny, but it's funny because of the side characters. It's not necessarily funny because of Matt himself or some of the things that he does. Because to be honest, a lot of the episode is just you got to believe me. And I love the judge. He's hilarious, especially when he's like, may the defendant please rise. And I'd like wipe off my glasses. I'm like, yo, there's so much spit on my shades right now after seeing that. That's crazy. But the one thing that I liked about the book is the fact that there was this idea of reality holes that they can be within people's houses, they can be within places that if you're there at the wrong time at the wrong place, you might end up falling through different realities and parallel worlds. And I like the fact that in the book, the reality police is like, yo, we know it's not your fault. We know that, this is what it is, but you're going so crazy with the reality warping that it's messing up other timelines. If we keep letting you get away with it, the world is going to go into chaos. Meanwhile, in the episode, the judge is like, you didn't appreciate reality. You were ungrateful, even though your life sucks. So he's like, therefore, you're going to get punished. Guilty, guilty, guilty. And he spams the guilty like 50 times, and you get this wormhole. And then Matt learns his lesson and then you get the twist ending, which the twist ending is darker. So I appreciate that. But it's like, so this was basically all for nothing. It's like, okay, the moral lesson kind of just went out the window because you find out that the police are actually pretty corrupt in a sense. Like you find out that they're actually corrupt people and maybe they're just being predatory more than kind of doing their job. So those are sort of my sort of nitpicks. Those are things that I didn't like compared to the book. But overall, I still give it an above average. This is a fun episode. And if you want to laugh hard, please go watch this and let alone just check it out for the reality police because they're much better in this episode than they are in the book. And those are my thoughts.
Great points. I can't really disagree with anything you said there. Really, I have nothing else to add. Really. You want to get into Spongy's thoughts before we declare the representative for "Don't Go to Sleep"?
Sure. Let's check out what Spongy's got to say. All right. So Spongy's thoughts about the episode. Oh man, it feels like they got some weird French surrealists to direct this one with all the weird camera stuff going on in that direction. It has such a weird vibe with it basically being set in a black void for most of it. The adults are over the top and aggressive, and of course, you got the crazy judge. The moral aspect of the book here with the same problem, but it's so over the top, I don't think it's meant to be taken seriously. It has the right idea, with Matt's problem being more because he's too young to do what he wants and possibly learning to accept the benefits of being young. But I think, which I think is better than the book setup. It's a messy one, but it certainly does capture the feeling of a crazy dream. I enjoy it as a so bad it's good, but it may oddly work for what it was going for, whatever it was going for. I rather enjoy it. I just can't figure out what they were thinking when they were making it or what they were smoking. Either way, at least it's fun.
I mean, that's fair points. They're taking. If I was a producer or a writer, I would have looked at the book and been like, okay, there's one of two avenues we can go here. We can take the ideas that are kind of prevalent in the book and make it more emotional, and we can give Matt realities where he's kind of shopping for a new life, or we can lean into that second half and just go off the wall batshit. And they chose the latter, but I guess they did that because this is 1997 when this episode came out. You had stuff like Big Bad Beetleborgs on Fox Kids. They're trying to fit the demographic of the network a little bit, and they're like, we got to be just crazy. Kids love this stuff, so I get why. But woulda, coulda, shoulda. We never know. Maybe they could have taken the story and actually made it something with substance. Who knows? But that's the beauty about the show, and especially in like season 3 when this episode came out. This is one of the more fun ones from that season. Genuinely funny ones. So take that for what you will. But given what we said, which do we prefer as the representative to face off against Dark? Do we like the book more? Do we like the episode? What are we deciding here?
For me personally, I'd probably go with the book. I think that the episode is more iconic and I definitely had more fun with it for me. But I think the book goes a little bit crazier in the second half in the right direction, where you can see Stein sort of coming up with a zany plot, but he's kind of has good writing with it. When you read it, there's some really good writing moments towards the second half that kind of wrap it up nicely, in my opinion. So I'd probably give it to the book.
Okay. What about you, Micah?
I personally would give it to the episode just because there's not as much meandering as the book is. It's just kind of gets right into the action, right into the fun. You get the reality police much earlier on. They're much better in the episode than they are in the book. I think the episode is just more entertaining overall for me personally. So I would go with the episode.
Okay. Okay. Given what Spongy said, did he say which one outright he preferred, or do we have to infer here?
He didn't outright say, but I would probably infer the episode because he said the book was decent, but he said the episode he actually has fun with. So I think he
Okay.
gives it to the episode.
And which leaves me here, which I've of course tied both of them. Here's the thing. I think more often than not, you know, I'm probably going to give, certain aspects to the episode, but then there's certain aspects I'm going to give the book over the episode. But for me, I don't think the episode quite achieves like genuinely good status. As in the back half of Don't Go to Sleep's book, like the second half, I think is actually genuinely good and possibly considered A tier Goosebumps, just for how chaotic and how adventurous it can be. And you do see those character moments start to poke through with Matt's character, and he's more heroic, and it gets a little more streamlined. Um, so on that front, if I had to pick, I think I want to pick the book, which makes it a tie. But because Spongy's not here to break a tie, I guess we have to do this. We usually use this as the tiebreaker, which is concept. Which one did the concept better? Is it the book or the episode? In your opinion?
I would say if we're going strictly off a concept, we're not going to include writing, we're not going to include the other stuff. I'd say the episode has a better concept. I think just the execution wasn't all there in terms of compared to what we get in the second half, but the concept is better because it deals with Matt basically being young and thinking he can't be the man, and then he becomes the man as an adult in a bunch of different realities, and he realizes, nah, I'd rather be a kid.
Yeah, I agree. Conceptually, I think the episode works better on the functionality of it. It's more focused and at least picks a lane and sticks with it, unlike the book. You don't get a riveting story out of it, but you see the concept on full display, what it's trying to be. Even though you lose the element, the power element that the book had of falling asleep and having to use that mechanism, you still mostly get the same thing or the similar idea. And you get, like I said, the humor from the second half of the book and the crazy off the wall things Matt experienced in the book. You get something totally different here, but more grounded in realism. I don't know. I have to agree. I think the concept is a little bit focused and better functionally in the episode. So I'll give it to the episode for that.
Yeah, I agree. I would definitely give it to the episode as well for all the reasons you guys said. I don't really think I can add anything really different than what you guys said, so I would give it to the episode as well.
All right. So Don't Go to Sleep's episode is going to be the facer off against the Are You Afraid of the Dark episode, The Tale of the Wisdom Glass. Like I mentioned before, we picked this one to face off against Don't Go to Sleep, particularly for the episodes, because they both feature ridiculous courtrooms with, ironically, the same guy who plays Matt in Don't Go to Sleep and Alan in this episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark. It's the same actor. And he's in a similar situation here. Um, but this episode kind of leans more into that. So if you've never seen The Tale of the Wisdom Glass, this is a season 6 Are You Afraid of the Dark episode. So we already know that a lot of you normie fans that only watch season 1 through 5 probably have no idea what we're talking about. Now, in case, for the select few that have seen it, it's the episode about a kid named Alan. He is basically the prince in the story Prince and the Pauper. This is kind of like a soft retelling of that with a crazy Y2K idea going on here, sense of nihilism with it as well. But Alan, he's affluent. He's out shopping at a mall, and he has his eye on shopping at this one store, which is kind of like a nerdy store. There's some computer games, and there's a new game that just came out called the Wisdom Game, and he's interested in that. And the store owner sees that the kid has come in, realizes that he's filthy rich, and he's going to buy some stuff. So he's on the phone with the dad to make sure that funds are in order. And while Alan's working that out, he meets this other kid named Jimmy, and Jimmy looks not as affluent as Alan, as let's just say. And the store owner has some prejudice against Jimmy for how he looks and maybe for his, um, lifestyle or maybe his, level of income, and has pretty much pegged him to be like a thief, and never has any money to buy anything. And Alan's like, "Don't listen to that jerk. I'll buy you one." And he's like, "Oh, thanks." And he's like, "Maybe we should hang out and play." And he's like, "Yeah, that'll be cool." Well, Alan gets busted. His dad cut off the funds, cut off the piggy bank. So um, Jimmy gets chased off by the store owner. Then Alan storms off, furious, but he brought with him the game, not knowing that he stole it essentially. And he goes outside to his limo, and he's like, "Well, I got the game. I'm not going to return it." And he sees this Jimmy kid waiting for a bus over there, and you see like a homeless person nearby him. And he's like, "Hey, Jimmy, come in the limo. I'll give you a ride home." They go over to Jimmy's place. He lives on the bad part of town, kind of in like a rundown apartment, but they make what they can do with his family situation, and they're messing around with the game on his computer, and they see that there's a competition the next day for $10,000, and Alan's like, "Well, since I got cut off money wise, this will be beneficial to me." And Jimmy, he's going to need the finances anyway because his family's in poor shape. But the game doesn't work mysteriously, and we see this glimpse of like a brief blink and you miss it, red eyes just appear on the screen. You're like, okay, what's going on here? Well, the kids end up at the competition the next day, and when they enter this building, they're the only two kids there, and they look around and they see all these weird Alice in Wonderland, just off the wall people, just dressed up in ridiculous costumes, and they're given robes to be put on, and they put them on, and there's this woman who has no eyes, and this woman, y'all, you want to think it would be that creepy, but this is one of the creepiest things I've ever seen Are You Afraid of the Dark pull off. Is this fucking woman? Holy crap, that's nightmare fuel to me. Um, Sorry for cursing, but it's genuinely unnerving. Okay, well, she looks at their names on this orb, and they see it turn red, and it clicks that hey, these kids stole this game, and they need to be punished. So they're brought to this courtroom with this judge who holds the wisdom glass. And for the rest of the episode, the kids now have to find a way to get themselves out of this situation because the wisdom glass is going to do whatever it wills, and the judge is going to carry it out because it willed it. And they have to navigate over the top jester who, if you didn't know, the actor who plays the jester, who is the lawyer of the kids in this episode, he played Ichabod Crane in The Tale of the Midnight Ride. There you go. Well, because of hurdles like that, the kids have to get themselves out of the mess, and they come to a conclusion that one of them has to take the blame. And we see this whole thing with Alan, where he's like, "Can you take the blame for me, Jimmy? I have a future." And I'm not saying that you don't, but I would really appreciate it if you did. And Jimmy's like, because you stuck up for me with that store owner, I'll do this one favor for you. But then Alan ups and dips once this opportunity arises, and then he has a change of heart once he realizes, maybe that Jimmy's trying to be a genuine friend with him, and he should be genuine back. And then we see what happens with the kids, and if they get out. And for once, there's an actual twist ending in Are You Afraid of the Dark episode. This is one of the handfuls that have a genuine twist. Because most of the time with Are You Afraid of the Dark, you're expecting some cheesy, copacetic ending. Everybody's kumbaya, hugging it out at a barbecue, talking about their plans for the future. You don't get that here, and it's quite refreshing for that show. But yeah, this story I think is about on par as entertaining as Don't Go to Sleep's book and episode. If I'm being honest, there's a lot of technical marvels that this episode is just firing on all cylinders. I think the director Jacques Labarge, I wrote his name down just so I can compliment him here. His vision for this is very French surrealist. Like Spongy brought up about the episode for Don't Go to Sleep. There's some French surrealist thing going on here. I think it's more evident in this episode. In the costume design, the practical effects design looks great. The concept is actually quite intriguing, where you have a video game competition and the kids are brought here, but turns out that there's some covert ops going on, and they know a secret that they don't want them to know. There's something about that is kind of gripping, and the whole sequence with the courtroom stuff, while it could be a lot more expedited and they can get into more fun things in the episode than spending all the time on this, there is some fun moments and some humor in there to kind of laugh at, and there is some good character moments with Alan and Jimmy, the two main characters. And I think that's probably the biggest strength that this episode has, is that it builds characters better than Don't Go to Sleep did, even in a full book. I think there's still a clear arc for both characters. While Jimmy's more of a doormat, he still knows that he has a say in the situation. And Alan, he starts off nice, turns into a jerk, and then has to be nice again. I don't know. You buy into their friendship. It feels organic, and it feels like something you can back. Now, the problems, there are some problems here, y'all. There are some pretty big noticeable ones. Um, the story's pace isn't the greatest. It's just kind of flying through plot. And then when we get to the actual location that the story's mainly focused around, it's legit just a courtroom scene for like the remainder of the episode. When you're promised a tournament on a printout page from the game, and you get there and it's just a court, whatever. They could have still had that element, but they could have made it more fun, put the kids against each other, put them at odds, made them not friends and then friends again. You could have gone that route. I don't know if they had no budget for this or they were stretching the budget thin with the effects or the set pieces or whatnot, but it could have been better in that. The acting can be cringe at times. we still have Matt's actor from Don't Go to Sleep here. He's not that good. Jimmy's actor is not that good either. Even some like adult actors in here are kind of bad. And then you have some really goofy moments, especially dealing with the wisdom glass, which ironically is one of the most underutilized aspects of the episode. There's not enough emphasis on the thing, and you would think that it plays more of a role, but all it is some magic 8 ball that a judge uses to cast judgment on you. It's kind of lame. They could have been better there. But I thought the ending was kind of dark, given the implications, so it is what it is. But yeah, I'd probably give this like a 7.2 out of 10 again. Yeah, about even with the other ones. I'll pass it over to whichever one of you want to take that over.
Micah, you want to go or you want me to go?
I'll go. So I wasn't the biggest fan of this episode. I thought it was definitely more on the boring side. It's a very like I don't know how to describe it. Like while there is some more fast-paced stuff, especially once you get to the court scene, all the stuff building up to that is very lame and just doesn't really have much substance to it, in my opinion. I think that, you know, I feel like there's a lot of meandering that could have been cut there. And maybe you could have cut some of that and added some of that tournament stuff and maybe shortened the court scene a bit. I think that the acting was pretty okay. It wasn't horrible, but I've noticed that Matt's actor, for some reason, he seemed almost worse in this episode, despite the fact that he's older. I just don't think he did a good job. I will say I gotta commend the look and aesthetic of the jury and the judge, and also of course the what was her name? I wrote her name down. It was the keeper who was the woman. Like they all looked really creepy. They did a good job with like the masks and the prosthetics on the keeper to give her the eyeless look. That was all really well done and creepy, and I thought that was really effective. But it was overall just kind of a lacking episode for me personally, as a lot of dark episodes seem to be. You know, it could have been a lot better based on the concept. I do like the fact that they give it a darker ending, though. I think that was a really nice change of pace, really refreshing to have this twist, kind of like a Goosebumps kind of thing, and actually, again, have these pretty dark and morbid implications for what's going to happen to these two characters based on a revelation that you get earlier on in the episode. So I thought that was really effective, but overall it was just kind of a meh episode. I gave it a 5 out of 10, just kind of right in the middle for me.
Okay. Let's see. Let's see. BD's thoughts too on this. You have anything to add? To what Micah said.
I'm probably going to shock some of you with this, but I actually gave this episode an 8 out of 10. I think it's a pretty good episode. Actually, in fact, I just think it's a straight out good episode, with some problems, but yeah, I really enjoyed the story pretty much overall for what it was. Some of the things I like about it is I actually like the dynamic between the main rich kid and the poorer kid, because I like the fact that they come from completely different worlds. You kind of see their sort of different personalities pretty naturally. I mean, the dude who comes from a poor side of town is pretty humble, and he always kind of his actor does I think a pretty good job showing it how kind of embarrassed he is, how sort of like he doesn't feel comfortable in a lot of his settings because of his situation. While in the meanwhile, I think Alan pretty much does a good job playing the snob. I mean, he's got the Macaulay Culkin look. He's got the whole thing where he basically thinks he's on top of the world. He gets offended at people. He does that thing where he buys whatever he wants and thinks it's going to get credited. And I like the fact that he actually helps out the other kid, and he explains to his limo driver he's doing it because it gives him a sense of superiority, the fact that he's interacting with essentially plebs. And I'm like, whoa, that is pretty deep. That's actually pretty deep for a little bit of a relationship between some friends, where he's openly admitting I'm doing it so I feel more empowered and more secure. It's not necessarily because I'm doing it for his benefit. And that changes as the episode goes. So I think that's pretty well done. I liked the whole wisdom glass, basically them getting invited to there. And it feels very much like a cult. Like when you actually go there, you see all their different wardrobes, seeing the trial, the jury. The dude who was basically the judge looks like a guy off of Squid Games. The mask that he got, he looks really sort of weird and ominous, but you can tell he's powerful. The lady with no eyes is straight up nightmare fuel. I mean, she is scary, arguably one of the scariest things I've seen in Are You Afraid of the Dark? Like it's up there with what I would say is like the pool zombie, the dude from Night Shift. Like this lady with no eyes is horrific. And I needed a lady like that because if Felicia had no eyes, she would have never seen all the times I cheated on her. But this is not my jury trial. So I also like the fact that the episode takes place in a courtroom because I don't know about you guys, but I'm a fan of video games like Ace Attorney and Danganronpa. I like court trials. I like people basically trying to find evidence and going at each other. And I think that this episode actually did a kids' horror version of a trial pretty well because the rich kid and the poor kid are actually playing a game of chess. They're actually sort of testing each other. The rich kid is like a W gaslighter. He's like manipulating the kid. He basically holds them at one point. He basically leads them into like the top 10 ultimate anime betrayals. He basically throws this guy under the rug and he has to change his ways because he realized that this kid is looking out for me way more than I'm looking out for him. You get a change of heart. And the fact that the episode ends on a dark ending is actually pretty good because of the fact that they're willing to decapitate him. There was literally a guillotine. They were maniacs, dude. They were trying to kill these kids, and the fact that they stuck true to the ending, where they're like, no, 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 fate is gonna land no matter what. Even through your wisdom, you can't escape fate. I actually like that. And one of the funniest things in this whole episode is the jester, because I kept thinking about those memes where it's like the Snapchat filter with the caption, "Look at my lawyer dog, I'm going to jail." This jester is the ultimate "look at my lawyer dog, we're going to jail." The dude was absolutely funny and how ridiculous he was. I love the fact that he talks in poems and rhymes. So I actually had a fun time with the episode. The only negatives I have that prevent it from being really good, I think they did take some shortcuts. They didn't go as adventurous with the whole tournament aspect like you guys brought up. And to be honest with you, I think that the whole Alan coming back was a little too forced. That whole thing where he basically betrays the hell out of the other kid and then looks at the fact that he bought hockey tickets and he's like, I got to go back and save him. It's like, you kind of did him really dirty and you are sort of a pretty manipulative guy. So the fact that, you thought that you could get away with it and the fact that the jury and the judge is like, nah, you're not getting away with it, bro. We can see you for who you really are. I like that. So I'd give it an 8 out of 10. This is a good episode.
I can appreciate the love for this episode, but hearing what you said kind of reminded me of another negative I have with it. So there's a whole aspect early on. We get a sense of this game, the wisdom game, right? It's being bought at a store. Okay, there's a part of the story when I think what is it, the keeper mentions to the kids that wisdom cannot be bought. It cannot be stolen, right? Well, why is there a wisdom game for sale? Why is this game even a thing? If you guys are the protectors of the wisdom glass and wisdom itself, why are you making a game to sell wisdom when it can't be sold? So why would you care if it's still like it's one of those things that I guess it's not supposed to be thought of, but when you think about it, you're like, all right, why is this game even a thing? Is it made for this tournament? Why aren't we seeing the tournament? It's just one of those things like it feels forced for these kids to meet. Perhaps if they just tweaked it to be that they both love this game and they get brought to the tournament, but maybe they cheat at the tournament and you can still play. Hey, you guys are cheating. We're gonna take you to jail, or where you're both are cheating, so now we got to punish you. They could have done that angle and got across the same thing here, but maybe not to the same degree. But they could have definitely made it more fun and entertaining. I don't know. It's just there's some elements to it that are unfortunately so skimmed over, and it's kind of egregious. Which brings me, I already peeked at Spongie's thoughts on this. So if y'all have anything you want to add, we'll get into Spongy, and you'll kind of like echo what I just said there a little bit.
I'm going to take point two off because he's got a point. Selling a wisdom game is kind of crazy if you say wisdom can't be bought. It's kind of like the whole thing where people say like, oh yeah, you can't buy parenting. You got to learn parenting. And then you got books that are like parenting 101. It's like, I don't know about that, bro. I don't know about that. But I will say though, I guess in one way to, I guess, do it justice, maybe this is reading too far into it. But the keeper did call them newborns, so maybe there's a chance that she's kind of riffing on the fact that they are naive, the fact that they think that wisdom can be bought, and maybe it's a way to basically target people that are naive and kind of put them into certain situations because the way that they acted during that jury trial kind of seems like they're preying upon people more than it actually being a tournament. So you could argue for that point, but I'm not gonna lie, you got a point. From a surface level, selling a game that says, you can get wisdom even though you say wisdom can't be bought. It's a little fishy.
All right, let's get into Spongy's thoughts on this, and then we'll decide the winner here.
Let's see what Spongy's guys. All right, so Spongy, oh my God, this man wrote a thesis. Tale of the Wisdom Glass. When I saw the summary, I thought this was going to be a greatest hit collection as we got computers, games, and another stealing is bad lesson. Boy, that wasn't the case despite those things. I quite enjoyed this. It's a goofy one in the latter half, with this whole trial plot as we get the music and some goofy humor, including a jester lawyer. Of course, I enjoy that stuff. It doesn't go as crazy as others, but it still worked. The music is especially good here, and the jester is fun with how annoying he is with his rhyming. There are interesting visuals, like with the eyeless woman. Although most of it is filmed in a void, it still has a solid set dressing. I like the dynamic with the kids from the start, as this rich kid stands up for the poor kid. He's mostly your usual jerky rich kid, and part of this performance is still a nice thing. It shows him with a somewhat complex. There's a neat class element to this, as Jimmy is assumed to be a criminal a lot because he's not well off, and Allison is assumed to be honest because he's above everyone. It's not that deep, but it works. There's nice emotional bits here, although Alan can be too much of a dick at times. We get Jimmy allowing Alan to throw him under the bed because he did one nice thing early on. Still, that redemption works well enough. Not much for logic here. They go through this whole tournament and game, and they can somehow tell that they stole the game and do all this. Not sure how all this works, but at a certain point, I don't care. Spoilers that it had a fabled bad ending. It works as a shocking moment, but doesn't make much sense and just feels like a harsh punishment for the kids. They plan to be straight up executed. So while it isn't without some clunky aspects, I still liked it a fair bit. It has a solid main dynamic, but it is fun with all the wacky stuff it gets into, while still having some stakes. Overall, a solid, pleasant surprise. Quinn finally gets a story, and it's a good start. I will say this basically cements him as the worst. Can't get into all of it, but he's angry at Andy for silly reasons, and even at the end, he gets mad again. Jeez. You know what? He's got a good point that I didn't mention in mine, but I like the fact that it was shown that he's like, oh yeah, because you're rich, because everyone views you as a higher class, they're gonna trust you. And at the end, you find out now by his actions that's actually false. A lot of sometimes higher level people can get away with stuff under the rug because of their perceptions. So I give a shout out to Are You Afraid of the Dark for doing topics like that, even in a kids horror thing on Nickelodeon of all things.
Yeah, I do think that you can definitely see classism messages in and throughout the story, and like the preconceived notions and prejudice that people put on, or like unconscious bias. You even see it with Jimmy and Alan with their own personal friendship. Like Jimmy has these assumptions about Alan, and Alan has these assumptions about Jimmy. Like Alan's like, you have to understand that I'm rich and I have a future, and Jimmy's like, he's kind of aware when he says that. He's like, oh, so you think I'm poor? So you think I'm going to take the blame for you? I think that's a really good idea and very mature to put into a story, and it tells it, like I said, in a realistic way, and it feels organic. Um, and Spongy has some great points there. Um, so yeah, that brings us to the victor of this final JonTron face off here. Which one do you think is better, by a show of hands, or if you want to say something, Mike, I'll pass it to you first. Which one do you think is better?
I personally prefer Don't Go to Sleep, the episode. I think that it was more entertaining, more fun. It was a nice quick pace to it. It gets to the action pretty quickly. There's not much meandering, and I just think it's a lot more enjoyable overall.
Okay. Spongy. Let's go ahead and read off Spongy's here. See which one he prefers. because I
Uh,
think this would be a good starting point of how this is going to end.
all right. So with his Victor, he said, "Yeah, this one's easy. Wisdom Glass isn't perfectly executed, but it's a solid story with decent themes and some fun weirdness. The only major connection to Don't Go to Sleep is the court stuff in the episode, and this commits Sleep more to being a courtroom drama. Basically, Sleep is a fun story, but the book feels rushed, and the episode is on something, and I want some. Sleep's episode may be the most fun of these. Wisdom Glass is the most actual quality, so it wins. Not much else to add."
Was the actual qual. Okay. Um, BD, points wise, I think I know where you're going, but which one do you prefer?
I'm gonna give it to Wisdom Glass. I think that the story had stuff more so that I liked in it. I would put them kind of in the same tier with sort of like how I feel about the book, but I think Wisdom Glass had some better stuff, and I do like the way that it handled themes and some of the writing. So, Are You Afraid the Dark wins in my book?
Yeah, and because I three-way tied all three of these, I have to kind of pick one now. Um, in terms of enjoyability, Don't Go to Sleep's book or the episode or Wisdom Glass, I could be in the mood for it at any point. They all have their own different things that I like about them specifically. But if I'm looking at the things that actually count here, like execution of a concept, uh, character progression or arcs, concepts like of monsters, maybe some horror elements thrown in there, enjoyment. I think that Wisdom Glass offers more than Don't Go to Sleep, personally, in terms of its story and what it has to say. And honestly, the Eyeless Woman is scarier than anything that you'll see in Don't Go to Sleep. Maybe not as fun. It's not as fun. It does get kind of boring. But even when it's boring, Wisdom Glass still manages to be exciting. And that's a weird thing to say. And I've mentioned this in my review. Wisdom Glass, I've been all over the place with it. I've seen it quite a few times now. There would be moments in some times where I really like it, and some moments in times where I just think it's boring. It just depends on my mood, I guess. But this time around, I just think that Wisdom Glass has more to offer than even Don't Go to Sleep's book, and I think it's because Wisdom Glass is more focused. For one, this is a telltale, lesson to be learned for future podcasts or even previous podcasts. The more focused you are in the execution of your concept, the more likely you're able to win. And I think Dark. It's been a while since Dark beat Goosebumps on here. It's been a while, but I'll give it to Dark on this one. I just think that for the idea of like courtroom horror, do you even say that? Um, they're both kind of in that same camp, but I just think Wisdom Glass has that better package and the better presentation. Held back by flaws, but solid. So yeah, we'll give it to Wisdom Glass on this. So Are You Afraid of the Dark? Beat Goosebumps. It's been a while. It's been a while. I know, Michael, you're probably upset, but I think this is a fair one here. I think this is a fair one here. All right. So now that we finished JonTron, the JonTron trilogy, our discussion tonight, because we haven't had a discussion in two podcasts, we're going to talk about our thoughts on JonTron's takes and perhaps his mindset going into what he picked for Goosebumps and what we think about that. And BD, I want you to start this discussion off because before we got on to record, you brought up some really good points, and I just want you to I want to give you the floor first about this. Um, you recently rewatched the JonTron trilogy on his videos that he made, and you have some interesting thoughts, and I think everybody could benefit from hearing them. So why don't you go ahead and share them?
Well, first, let me do Spongy real quick because he did have actually one paragraph of thoughts, and he was pretty neutral about it. So
Oh, okay.
I guess
Let's do Spongy.
he was pretty neutral. So I'll start off there because I got more sort of specific thoughts. So let me read off Spongy real quick. He just said as quickly, I don't have a lot to say here. JonTron videos are fun and his picks are mostly good, but Ghost Beef stands out as not quite deserving of it. Acting aside, it's mostly middling. I'd swap it out with others like An Old Story, Cap, or Teacher's Pet, maybe Strain Peas. There's better options, but otherwise the others weren't some rifling. That's all I got. So he was pretty neutral. So here's my thoughts about JonTron's whole Goosebumps thing and just sort of overall his thoughts. Now, To clear up, JonTron is one of the inspirations that caused me to start up a YouTube channel. He's always been one of my favorite content creators. He makes me laugh. I absolutely love his old stuff. Some of his newer stuff, he covers more real life stuff. I like back in the day when he covered media that people didn't know about, nostalgic stuff that we forgot about, old retro games. I've loved him. I think he's one of the most entertaining people. Whether you agree with the stuff he says is kind of irrelevant to me. I just think as an entertainer, he's really funny, he's iconic, and he's always a legend in my books. And I love the fact that in any of his skits, he always goes the extra mile. He puts so much work and attention just into those 30-second bits between each of his reviews. But first thoughts about Goosebumps. I noticed that while his critiques of Goosebumps were obviously funny and entertainment oriented, I noticed some things that kind of hinted towards some bias that were kind of shown before his trilogy of reviews started and at the end of it. So, and this is also including Are You Afraid of the Dark? So I guess I'll piece it together. It's clear to me that John Tron, first of all, is a fan of the Goosebumps books much more than he is the TV show. From his thoughts, I can gather that he prefers the OG 62 books. He prefers R.L. Stein's writing and choices over what the TV show did. And in fact, he openly says at one point that he doesn't know how R.L. Stein would feel that some of his books are being basically mishandled by a bunch of idiots on the TV show. It's played up for jokes, but that's sort of his thoughts. And he says that, shows like Are You Afraid of the Dark, which we covered a lot on this podcast, was spookier than Goosebumps, scarier than Goosebumps. And he seems to have a sort of bias towards Are You Afraid of the Dark because with Goosebumps, he picked the three worst episodes, but for Are You Afraid of the Dark, he picked the first three episodes. He didn't pick the worst episodes of Dark, which if he would have done that for Goosebumps, it would have been Haunted Mask, Girl Who Cried Monster, and Cuckoo Clock of Doom, which the first two are straight up bangers that people love. So it would have been a much different outcome. And he said some things, which, yeah, he prefers the books. He says that R.L. Stein does a better job with books. I do have to highlight some things. He said that in his beginning that there are good episodes in the Goosebumps show that basically accurately adapt the books, like Haunted Mask, which he's right. Haunted Mask, for the most part, accurately adapts the book, and they're both very much beloved, and you often see people give them sort of similar scores. But then he showed footage of Haunted Mask 2, and I'm like, wait a minute. Stop the train. Slow your roll, buddy. The Haunted Mask 2 episode is vastly different from the book. And it is, in my opinion, leagues better than the book. It is leagues better than the book. I used to be nicer towards the book, and I still think the book is good, but it is disappointing as a sequel to the Haunted Mask first book compared to the episode, which is in some ways, some people could argue, like me, it's better than the Haunted Mask 1 episode because it wraps up the story well. It had a completely different storyline. You had an amazing villain with the shopkeeper. You got all these lovable, extra stuff added to basically Steve. Steve's whole thing is that he's suffering, yes, in the book, but in the episode, he suffers way more. There's way more horror involving what happens to Steve in the episode where you see the kid suffering. And then the shopkeeper blackmails him. You get all this stuff. There's so much better stuff that the writers and producers did in the show for that episode than what R.L. Stein did in the book, which R.L. Stein's book kind of felt like a phone-in, just sort of felt like he was building off the hype of Haunted Mask 1. So you can't give credit to what the show did to the book because they're not accurate. And there's a lot of people who confuse the book for the episode, which I never understood because they're vastly different. They're not at all the same storyline. The episode storyline is its own thing. So that I had to call it. I'm like, no, John, no, they're not the same. And, he says that the show is written by idiots, which is unfair because there's a lot of better adaptations. Listen, all of these specials, all of the TV specials, in my opinion, are great. I love all the TV specials in Goosebumps. Terror Tower is great as a two-parter, pretty much accurate to the book. Micah, forget you. It's great for what it is, all right? Listen, Night Living Dummy 3 is great as a two-parter. Mike, yeah, Mike is 9 to 7. Okay, we got a common sense here. It's great. Listen, and Neil Shusterman worked on that one. Werewolf of Fever Swamp is an amazing two-part. Everybody pretty much loves Werewolf of Fever Swamp for all the right reasons, and it is different to the book. It takes a different direction. It fleshes out scenes. It's better than the book in a lot of ways. And obviously, we talked about Haunted Mask 1. Haunted Mask 1 is faithful to the book, but it has its own charm. It gives characteristics with Catherine Long and stuff like that. So John Tron is a little bit too harsh in that regard because Dan Angel, Billy Brown, and Neil Shusterman did a lot of great stuff on the show. And to kind of rope that in with some of the lowest parts of the show is unfair, especially when you're hyping up Are You Afraid of the Dark? Yo, Are You Afraid of the Mid? A lot of that show is boring, corny, and cheesy. 80% of Are You Afraid of the Dark is not spookier than Goosebumps. Point blank, period. Let's stop the conversation. What does everybody bring up in Are You Afraid of the Dark? Oh, the pool zombie. Heard that one a million times. Okay, what else you got? Okay, Midnight Madness is pretty spooky. Okay, I didn't know Bucktooth Nosferatu was scary, but okay, whatever. You got some scary stuff, Secret Admirer, Water Demons. I got that. Misfortune Cookie, Virtual Pets, Hungry Hounds, Long Ago Locket, Lonely Ghost, Unexpected Visitors. Do I need to go on? Tale of the Manaha. There's so much mid, bad, and just straight up doggy doo-doo crap in Are You Afraid of the Dark that always gets thrown under the rug in discussion. And John Tron's video got millions of views and it influenced a lot of people because there's probably a lot of people out there who, and this is who I think John Tron caters to, his videos cater to people who grew up on the shows but have not revisited them in a long time until they became adults. And as adults, they look at them picking it apart, they treat it as accurate, and they don't actually watch it for themselves. Or maybe they grew up liking Are You Afraid of the Dark more, so they sort of have that lens that, yeah, Are You Afraid of the Dark is better. But me personally, and I don't like throwing myself in as some sort of messiah. I'm not the messiah, but I did not. I grew up watching Goosebumps, but I didn't watch it for a dozen. I didn't watch it for 10 years, y'all. I didn't touch it in a decade. I didn't touch anything Goosebumps for a decade. My YouTube channel marked the time that I came back to the series. And Are You Afraid of the Dark? I didn't watch it at all. I've watched Are You Afraid of the Dark first time watches as an adult. There's so many problems with the show. Do not be biased. Actually go into the field and experience it and then come up with thoughts. Do not let the internet or people influence your thoughts until you actually experience something. Because JonTron's entitled to his opinion, but that's his opinion. Is that your opinion? Does his opinion specifically have to align with yours? No. You can go into the field, you can check it out and see your own thoughts. So I always say JonTron is a great entertainer. I always treat his Goosebumps videos and Are You Afraid of the Dark videos as some of the best videos just because they brought attention back to the series. They're absolutely hilarious just from an entertainment standpoint, but you don't have to always agree with them. And I think that a lot of people who oftentimes shit on the Goosebumps show are very much biased, and you guys are a little bit disrespectful to a lot of brilliant minds that kind of worked on it. But those are my thoughts. So let me give the floor to you guys.
Great. Like that's exactly what I I wanted everybody to hear. Before I share what I want to say and my just thoughts on the videos now and how I think they've aged, I want to pass it over to Micah. What is your thoughts on John Tron's opinions in the trilogy, or I guess the episodes he picked, or anything of that nature?
I definitely think when I first was watching JonTron back in the day, he did pick episodes that I didn't like. I did not like Ghost Beach. I did not like Harry's Adventure, and I did not like Don't Go to Sleep when I was a kid. But on these most recent rewatches, I have learned to appreciate Don't Go to Sleep and Ghost Beach a bit more. They both have their flaws, particularly Ghost Beach in terms of the acting, but they're way better than what JonTron claims they are. And I feel like, in my personal opinion, I feel like some of his points were exaggerated for comedy's sake. Like he probably doesn't genuinely feel this strongly about the episodes as the videos let on, and he was just kind of having a bigger, more dramatic persona for the sake of a joke. But I definitely think there were some better episodes he could have chosen. If he wanted to do the bad episodes, Harry's Adventure, yeah, that's a fair contender there. But again, as BD mentioned, there's so many other episodes you could have chosen, like Teacher's Pet, Deep Trouble. My opinion, It Came From Beneath the Sink is not very good. There's just so many other really bad episodes. Even Horrorland, in my opinion, is not that good. And like I feel like there's so many episodes out there that are way worse than Ghost Beach and Don't Go to Sleep. And I do feel like maybe what he could have done, again, as BD said with the Are You Afraid of the Dark, is also review some of the bad episodes. Even though I can't remember if Are You Afraid of the Dark or Goosebumps came first from his videos, but like I personally feel like if you wanted to do more of a fair comparison, say he started with the Are You Afraid of the Dark video. I can't remember which one he started with, but hypothetically, he started with the Dark video, praising the episodes and choosing some episodes that he liked or episodes that he thought were good. He should have done the same with Goosebumps then. He should have picked some equally good episodes that he did like and maybe riff on those a bit, because it proves in the Dark video that while he likes the episodes, he still found funny ways to rip into them and, make funny commentary. So like I feel like he could have done the same thing with some of the good episodes like Haunted Mask or Girl Who Cried Monster or some of those episodes. He still could have made it funny. And that's really kind of my thought on it. I don't really have much else to say, but
Yeah, and just to clear it up, his Goosebumps videos did come out well before his Are You Afraid of the
okay.
Dark one.
So then I'll flip my script to say the dark one should have been bad episodes.
Yeah, and that leads me to my thoughts on John Tron's videos. I love the videos when they first came out, and for many years I kind of saw and noticed the impact JonTron's opinions had on the community. It brought attention to Ghost Speech, and then all of a sudden, all these Ghost Speech haters came out of nowhere. Don't Go to Sleep haters came out of nowhere. My Harry's Adventure. You want to know something about all three of those books now that I'm thinking about it? They're some of the more lesser talked about books. And maybe because people think that JonTron buried them in the sand so hard, nobody should ever talk about them because what's the point? And here's the thing, you revisit it now, right? And we've all watched the episodes, read the books, we've compared them to other things that are similar. Most of them are not that bad, or it's very exaggerated. His videos are exaggerated comedy, and I don't know if he maybe picked these maybe because he was more susceptible to writing good material around them. It feels kind of like that, especially with Ghost Speech. I feel like he possibly picked that one because it's easy to build jokes off just the effects alone. So maybe that's why he picked it. But when I hear what he's saying, and trust me, there are some things that are actually true that he says, and there's some truth in some insults here. I think BD's on the money. I think he actually made those Goosebumps comedy bits in that series as more of a slam piece on Goosebumps. And I know that's kind of accusatory for me to say that he made a slam piece, but especially when you look at the aftermath of that and you hear his thoughts and you hear him say, oh, the show had bad writers. R.L. Stein did it better. And then you look at what he picked for Are You Afraid of the Dark, and he just took a cop out and picked the first three episodes instead of picking possibly his favorites to simp on, or even the worst episodes. And I'm going to be honest, y'all. I'm going to be honest. The worst episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark may not hit the absolute low that Goosebumps did with My Harry's Adventure, in my personal opinion, but more often than not, those episodes are comparably bad, if not worse, than the worst of Goosebumps. And especially when you're looking at Ghost Speech and Don't Go to Sleep, they are not that bad functionally as that I've seen Are You Afraid of the Dark fumble the bag on with quite a few stories from them. And I guess this is one of those situations where you can see that there was one time a fledgling bandwagon of people on YouTube saying that Are You Afraid of the Dark is the superior show over Goosebumps or the superior IP. But we've been 24 episodes deep. We've compared many dark episodes to Goosebumps at this point, and I'll be upfront. Sometimes they're pretty much close to Goosebumps, but here's the thing, and it all comes back down to two things, right? That I think JonTron doesn't fail to recognize in his videos, or give enough credit to, I should say, within the riffing, is that functionally these things are working. You can at least acknowledge that. And most often than not, Goosebumps works functionally better as a story. Now, Are You Afraid of the Dark? They have concepts that are better, which I could see is more appealing, or maybe scarier makeup effects for their monsters. Fair enough. But aside from those things, the horror is usually put to the side. Are You Afraid of the Dark? Minus those handful of episodes that you get, like the pool zombie episode, or you'll get water demons. Are You Afraid of the Dark has a good amount of just not scary Disney Channel stuff, or reminiscent to that. And I'm just, it kind of, I think the JonTron's videos personally have not aged the best, because I think the opinions are starting to be kind of scrutinized a bit, especially when the community these days are starting to become more open on the idea that the episodes did in fact do some things better than the books, and it's about time that we give those writers the credit that they deserve from that show, um, and stop just giving Stein all the praise all the time, because you know these writers often than not fix the hindsight issues the books had. Dark didn't have hindsight issues because they wrote it for the show. And if you want to still say that that's more commendable, whatever. But I think the writers of the Goosebumps show handled most of what they were given most of the time better, given their budget, and at least they made them with, I think, more heart, more than not, more than often. So that's just me. But JonTron, like I said, there are some grains of truth of still what he says. Like, of course, effects are bad. Of course, this is a cringy moment. Of course, this is a funny moment to riff on, kind of thing. But they're not that bad. That's just me.
I would also say, this is my final point, one of the big differences between the Goosebumps TV show and just Are You Afraid of the Dark is just memorability. If you look at the Goosebumps TV show, even the bad episodes, even the ones that people don't seem to talk about, are very memorable, and they end up in a lot of conversations. When you talk about Are You Afraid of the Dark, what is talked about in Are You Afraid of the Dark? It's always the same 15 to 18 episodes, the very top ones, the very most popular ones, the mascot episodes. But 80% of that show is basically you've seen the photo of the iceberg where a little bit is shown above and there's that giant abyss beneath. 80% of Are You Afraid of the Dark is that iceberg underneath the water that's completely forgotten. Nobody talks about, nobody knows it exists. It's just that top 20% that basically serves as the iceberg to stop the Goosebumps Titanic ship. Like, that's it. People don't talk about the rest. So I think when you have to be fair, you have to look at the entire show. Do not cherry pick. Because when you're talking about two titans, you got to treat it fairly. And that's where I leave it at.
Yeah, it would be different if JonTron, like you said, if he picked Hungry Hounds or Virtual Pets or Gruesome Gourmets and riffed on those. That would be a different story. But he didn't. He just picked the first three Dark episodes and kind of went on a love spiel about it.
Listen,
Which,
listen.
yeah,
If a virtual pets rant by JonTron got 10 million views, everybody would be on the same boat as us. Trust me, a lot of y'all would be putting up porta potties with the virtual pets screenshots put as the posters above. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
so yeah, that wraps up the JonTron trilogy, y'all. So yeah, that was fun. I think we had a fun time doing these and kind of reminiscing on some famous YouTube past of Goosebumps history and Are You Afraid of the Dark history indirectly. So yeah, that's it for this episode. I'm gonna put Micah and Beatty's information where you could follow them, where you can find their stuff at, down in the description and in the comment section of this video. As always, for our next episode, which is going to be episode 25, we have decided to kind of shift gears a little bit into movies. And for this special, we're going to be looking at Goosebumps 2015. And we're going to be facing it off against Jumanji, which is going to be interesting. And if you tune in, especially if you're Goosebumps 2015 fans, you might hear some things that might make your ears bleed, but I feel like it needs to be said. So yeah, that's it for tonight's episode. We thank you all for coming. If you like the podcast, please drop a like. If you aren't sub to this channel to check out every Goose Junkies episode, please do so. Um, and check out the playlist on this channel where you can check out every single episode if you need to get caught up anywhere. So till next time, take care and see you later.
Deuces.